All right, so it is a pleasure. Joel is with us again. Joel's been coming every year since the inception of this program. So Joel is teaching at the Free University in Brussels. He's he lives in Brussels.
Yeah.
At the Institut Politiques de Paris. And after completing his research at St. Anthony's College, Oxford, one of the best universities. I'm joking, that's what it was. He teaches courses in European political systems at the University of Ottawa and has defended his thesis at the Institut Politiques in Paris. His thesis dealt with the Jeune Garde and what's the Jeune Garde? The young...
Okay. Young Guards.
In Paris? In Paris?
No.
Israel Society?
No, not communists.
In the communists. Okay, where? France? Okay. Where? The communist?
Worldwide Communist War Organization.
Okay.
It's a Cold War concept.
So students in the Cold War. It was published by Macmillan and St. Martin's Press in '96. Kotek is a member of several scientific organizations, including it's a very important organization, Memorial de Shoah de Paris. And if anybody doesn't know, it's was a fund that was set up from some of the money that was left in accounts and other places by French Jewish citizens that were deported from Paris and France to Auschwitz. And it took a long time, it took many, many decades for the community to gain access to take access to the funds. And the community set up this organization to promote Holocaust memorial and education. And I have to say, ISGAP received a small grant to do the seminar work in France. And it was something sad that this money is being used to deal with anti-Semitism in the current situation. But as they say in Yiddish, he's at the Jewish Museum in Warsaw, the Mechelen Holocaust Museum Foundation, the Adeline Project, and in many other organizations. Kotek was the head of the formation department at the Memorial de la Shoah and the Centre de Documentation Juive Contemporaire en France. He's a correspondent for the Morshe Cantor Center on Antisemitism and Racism, which looks at anti-Semitism around the world. And at the Free University in Brussels, he teaches a course on Holocaust and Genocide in the 20th century. He is, to our honor, a research fellow here with us at ISGAP, and he just published an interesting book. Joel did a lot of work on cartoons and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. So I'll pass around this brand new book, Mazel Tov of the book. And Joel will speak to us today about Belgium, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
No France.
Hold on, I'm going to read the exact title. Give me a second. The title is Contemporary Overview of Anti-Semitism in Belgium with a bit of France.
A bit of Europe.
A bit of Europe, okay. So thank you, Joel, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. So, I'm a French speaker, so I will, the first part, my presentation will be in two parts. The first part, I will read, it's 6 pages only, so I will try to be as less boring as possible. And the second part will be, because I love, caricatures, cartoons, things like this. I'm a specialist on comics. And I will show you some example of what I will try to demonstrate in my first presentation. So I will speak about what I call latent and pragmatic antisemitism. And in a sense, in the fact that I will show that anti-Zionism can be seen as a kind of civic religion through the case of Belgium, which is a very specific case, but according to me, which in a sense prefigure the future of Europe. So let's start about the Belgian case. So since 2001, Belgium, like France and Britain, witnessed the rise, as you know, of anti-Semitic incidents. Of course, the worst since 1945. Yet, Belgium, and again like France, has not become the anti-Semitic country that certain people believe it ought to be denounced as to the rest of the world. But very often when I go somewhere, people will ask me whether in Israel or in the States, how could you stay in France or could you stay in Belgium? Let me tell you the truth. If we have some problems, especially if you look like a Hasid in Antwerp because you can be beaten, or if you decided to put Israeli opinions in a daily like Le Soir or the Catholic daily Radio Belgique, well, it's quite easy to live in Brussels. It's quite easy to live in Belgium. There are no, as I said, discrimination as such against the Belgian people. They live in the best neighborhood, etc. They participate in the society, but it's not so easy sometimes to express certain opinion or to wear certain dresses. So anti-Semitism as such, but I mean traditional anti-Semitism, has even decreased. If you will say statistics, you will see that more Christian people will accept to have to be married with a Jew, etc. And strangely enough, they will see the Jews as white people, as you know, it wasn't the case before the war or just after the war. So it means anti-Semitism, and I would say within the mainstream people has decreased, and we can demonstrate it. And it's the same in France, and I would say the same in Britain. Yet, of course, one should be worried at the definitive release at what we call the anti-Semitic speech. Taboo, or even facilities that have been in place since World War II has been broken. For instance, as we spoke yesterday, the law against ritual slaughter is, I believe, a good indicator of change. It means for the last 2 months, you know, it became impossible to have ritual slaughter, whether in Flanders, whether in Wallonia. From Catholic circle to the extreme right, passing through a large part of the left, diverse groups take advantage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to release, through so-called anti-Zionist position, old anti-Semitic cliché, and you will see it, as I will show in the second part of my presentation. My thesis, this thesis, is far from being overdrawn. But before I continue my presentation, allow me to make an important point. Anti-Zionism is not necessarily on the order of anti-Semitism, even if the criticism is harsh or unfair. Compare Israel to Nazi Germany is anti-Semitic. Criticizing Netanyahu policy, according to me, is not. It could be, but couldn't be. Anti-Zionism should be considered anti-Semitic when criticism appears obsessive, totally disproportionate, unfair, phantasmatic, and this is why, and this is, I would say, the definition adopted by the European Parliament. They show example when anti-Zionism should be considered as anti-Semitic. This is why, in my presentation or in my lecture, I prefer to use the concept of radical anti-Semitism when it comes to radical anti-Zionism, when it comes to anti-Semitism. And the truth is that radical anti-Zionism has reached the mainstream of Belgian society. Opposition to Israel is in Belgium undisputed. Even the mainstream political party felt compelled to adopt anti-Zionist positions. The equivalent, for instance, of the Tory party in Belgium or of Les Républicains, for instance, in France. And my question, how to explain the phenomenon of radical anti-Zionism in a small country like Belgium? So first point, the failure of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process could only be a part of the explanation. The anti-Israeli passion, and according to me, there are no other words to describe the current hostility toward the Jewish state, is far too big to be explained only by external factors, such as the conflict itself. Of course, let's assume then the status quo policy of the Israeli government doesn't help us. Nevertheless, Belgian attitude towards Israel and Zionism seems to be much more influenced by internal factors, and I will express 7 internal factors that could explain radical anti-Zionism in the Belgian society. The first one is what I call a Catholic habitus. A Catholic habitus which gives the Jew the role of the scapegoat and which date back to the Middle Age. The Jew being responsible for the world misfortune, yesterday the plague, cholera, infanticide, wars, etc. and the myth of the child-killing Jews appearing here central. If one is to believe the principal editorialist of Bologna, Flanders, and Brussels, all the frustration of the Arab world, or even in the world, are the result of the non-resolution of the Palestinian question. The second factor is a leftist habitus. And a leftist habitus dating back also to the Middle Age, which associates the Jews with financial oppression and capitalism, now symbolized, of course, by the United States. And opposing Israel is a way of opposing the United States at low cost, without too much risk. The third factor is what I call an Arab-Muslim habitus. And this Arab-Muslim habitus that holds since 1948, the creation of the State of Israel, that the Jews are responsible for the misfortunes of the Arab world. This, and this is extremely important if you consider Belgium, this within the context of a demographic boom, a demographic reality. And what is this demographic reality? New demographic trends leave little hope, if you're Belgian. On one side, or maybe European, on one side the decline of the Belgian Jewry, we almost do not exist, maybe 30,000 Jews, 11 million Belgians, and of course a lot of assimilation. On one side, decline of the Belgian Jewry, and on the other side, a formidable dynamism of the community of Muslim origin, which makes up around 25% of the population in the Brussels metropolitan region. So a quarter of the people living in Brussels are Muslim origin. They're Belgian, they're from Muslim origin. Brussels is already the Western capital with the highest percentage of persons from Muslim origin or professing the Muslim religion. Population projections show that in about 2030, Islam will be the first religion in Brussels, which is, as you know, the capital of Belgium and Europe. Thus, around 25% of member parliaments, regional member parliaments, are originated from the Muslim world, mostly from Morocco. I teach at the Free University of Brussels, but I'm also working at the Parliament of Brussels. And 25% of my MPs are whether Muslim or Turk, so imagine, it's impossible to speak not only about Israel, about the Armenian genocide. It's impossible. Because if you speak about Armenian genocide, you will have the Turkish MPs who will definitely protest. So, in the Brussels regional Parliament where I work, 60% of the socialist MPs are originated whether from Morocco or Turkey. It is easy to understand why the only economical treaty ever denounced by this parliament was the one signed with Israel. Muslim vote in this context, you should understand it, is essential for leftist and even Catholic parties. We had a Catholic party in Brussels, they decided to call themselves unionists to be able to attract Muslim conservatives. 4. The new vision or strategy of the progressive left then sees the Muslim as the new oppressed class, as new wretched of the earth, according to Frantz Fanon concept. The Arabs are often presented as a new Jew, Judeophobia, as the new antisemitism, Islamophobia as the new antisemitism. Actually, the neglect of the working class by the post-war left explains the fact that the votes of the workers went to Trump in the States, to Marine Le Pen in France, and that the working class here in Britain supported the Brexit. Fifth element, a difficult relation with the Holocaust, especially in Flanders, where a certain percentage of nationalists did collaborate with the Nazis, and in this context, opposition to Israel is an easy way to forget, to forgive, or to trivialize Flemish collaboration. And there is a very famous quote, the European blame us for the evil they did to us. Those two factors that doesn't concern a priori the Jews, but the other by two others. The sixth one. And the sixth one is the difficulties of the Belgians to dealing with their own colonial past. The silence around the violence perpetrated by the Belgian colonizators against the Congolese, the Africans, is astonishing. This amnesia and you will remember that the only important studies that have been published was by an American Jewish historian who spoke about Belgian genocide in Congo. I think it was wrong, but anyway, is compensated by a feeling of guilt towards the third world and the temptation to turn aside the emotive charge of colonialism by a radical critique of Israel, the state of the Jewish people, towards whom, as I said before, the Belgian has also a sense of guilt because of the Holocaust. Within this vision, Israel is of course presented and perceived as a colonial white state. Last point, a certain dose of pragmatism. Above all, Belgium is a pragmatic country. As a former leading exporter per capita in Europe, Belgium must above all consider its commercial interests, which drive to a morality of viable geometry. It means act of compassion tied in with geopolitics. Economically, it's far less dangerous to have moral stance on Israel, Taiwan, or Rwanda than, of course, on China, Qatar, or Russia. So all those 7 factors combine to marginalize the Jews in Belgium. Well, they just don't demographically count anymore. And to transform Israel into the ideal scapegoat nation, which actually, was awarded to the Jews in the lower Middle Ages. As well as the Jew yesterday, Israel is now the misfortune of the world. In this respect, anti-Zionism could be seen as the latest avatar of the traditional habitus of blaming the Jews, despite of, precisely, because of their weakness. To blame the Jews has always been a tactic that works. In the Middle Age, rather than fighting armed infidels in the Holy Land, many crusaders chose to kill unarmed Jews instead. In the 19th century, rather than attack the true leaders of violence, it was the financier Jews that Proudhon or Karl Lueger in Vienna would reserve the sting of their criticism. Today, instead of attacking Turkey, the Kurdish problems, Morocco, China, Russia, or even the States, one prefers to attack Israel for its human rights violation. And by a subtle mechanism of transfer of animosity, the Jewish state has become a figure which substitutes for the rest of the world, and especially the United States, a superpower which is far harder to affront. So my conclusion, already? In conclusion, radical anti-Zionism should be seen as the policy of the lesser evil. Lesser evil. For the Belgian of the third millennium, anti-Zionism is a matter of consensus and sense. Opposition serves the interest of all the components of contemporary Belgian societies, the left as well as the right, Catholic as well as secular, immigrant as well as Walloon or Flemish. No other conflicts command such attention in Belgian university. BDS groups are more and more active with Belgian campuses, especially my campus in Brussels. In April 2013, the official Federation of Students officially joined the platform BDS. In May 2016, last year, more than 250 academics and many artists signed an appeal of the Palestinian so-called civil society in politics and occupation, etc. They demand the complete and constant boycott of all Israeli cultural and university institutions. In this sense, one should then consider that anti-Zionism as a veritable cultural code that acts as a fantastical evidence which serves to express all sorts of purpose. And what purpose? It's a tool for the Belgian to act as a virtuous country in foreign policy, for instance. Against Sharon, it was the universal competence, and we tried to attack Sharon, and of course not George Bush. For another purpose, it's a way to rehabilitate those Flemish nationalists who did collaborate with the Nazis. A kind of Schadenfreude that consider that Israel is now behaving like Nazis. This is very common. C, and this is, I think, maybe the most important, a pledge for the integration of the new Belgians. As I said, the criticism of Israel, or Armenia, it's the same, it has nothing to do with Israel, but Armenia is important too, has become the best way to please the Muslim voters. The Jews of Belgium are, according to me, victims of what should qualify as pragmatic anti-Semitism, a mixture of latent xenophobia and I would say local interests. No anti-Semitic interest at all. It's convenient, it's easy. Anti-Zionism acts as fantastical evidence which serve to express all sorts of resentment, failure of integration, worries in the face of globalization, class warfare, and conspiracy theory. The Belgian case is interesting as it might augur for the new place of the Jews in Europe in the third millennium, a marginal place, if not of paria. Parallel to the growth of population of Arab Muslim origin and at the same time, the accelerated decline of Jewish population, with the exception of France and Britain, which is different. In France they have 600,000 Jews, I believe. In Britain they are extremely well organized. But let's compare Belgium with Norway, with Italy, with the rest of Europe. So the marginalization of European Jewry will amplify as what I call the instrumentation of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So this is the end of the first part. So thank you. Then if you don't mind, what time is it? So now we'll try to be less boring. So it's okay. So now I will show you more or less so you better move. So I will try to explain through examples, through I would say cartoons, paintings, etc. What I've been trying to explain in the first part, the Catholic habitus, the leftist habitus, the new, Muslim hatred towards Israel, I would say the new Arabic antisemitism because it didn't exist before, and the impact on Belgium, etc. So, what I call the return to the traditional anti-Semitic vocabulary, what I called all myths as the building blocks of the contemporary anti-Semitic discourses. Maybe we can close the mic here if it's possible, or it should be somewhere. Yeah, voilà. And those was, traditional, the accusation against the Jew, satanic religion, Judaism seen as a satanic religion, the Jew seen as the master of the world, I think very important. The Christ killer, deicide, blood-sucking vampire, the Jews and ritual murder, and the Jews as practitioner of infanticide. And so the Jews as the personification of absolute evil, and what I call the Arab revival of the main accusation, Christian accusation, against Jews forged by the Christian Europe. And this is a very interesting concept. Antisemitism, it's myth against, dedicated, to the Jews of Christian anti-Judaism resurrected in the Arab Muslim lands. So the Jews as, absolute evil. This is a Nazi, the Sturmer front page, which this very famous sentence, die Juden sind unser Unglück, the Jews are the misfortune of the world, and then you see, the Jews out, the Jews, a satanic Jew out of the Talmud, and this was made when the Pope John Paul II went to Israel, and then you can see that the Jews is almost represented as it was, during the 30s by the Nazis. The same here, the Talmudic, Jews, the Bible here, the Talmud, and in a sense a good metaphor. You cannot criticize the Bible, you cannot be anti-Semitic, you can be anti-Zionist, you can criticize the Talmud. It's also a way. And this is the same, this was a Christian actually cartoonist in Lebanon, and it's a Talmud, you can see, and then, the Palestinian view from the Talmud. This is again, this is Sharon, the Bible, you can say, the Torah, and then you see it was the year 2000, Hasidic Jew, controlling the American beast, you can say. So the Jews is the master of the world, for example. This is Nazi, Lustige Blatter, actually it was founded by a Jew, and of course taken by the Nazi in 1933. The Jews, the Bolshevik, finally the British, and then 50 years after, the Jew America, of course, no more Bolshevik, it didn't exist anymore, the UN, the Arabic state, and then the Palestinian. And you can see, you know, strangely, the same representation. The fact, this is an anti-Masonic, anti-Judaic representation, 1942 Serbia, 1941 Serbia, a Masonic Jew, you know, manipulating Churchill and Stalin, and then you see Sharon manipulating George Bush, the Arab world, and the UN. Capitalist Jew, Jews controlling 2/3 of the world, and this is actually a cartoonist living in the States, in San Francisco, but from Algerian origin, and so Jerusalem from New York City to Kuala Lumpur, undivided eternal capital of Israel, etc. And this was taken to show, I've got many of those, I've got thousands of cartoons, showing that actually Obama has a Jewish puppet. And this is Obama and McCain, etc. Again. And this is very important. This is a Palestinian cartoon showing, you know, the fact that the Jews killed the Christ, but the Christ being personified like Palestine, Christ, etc. And then again, Nazi representation of the same, and the Jews as a Christ killer. And this is very popular within Christian group, Catholic group, since 1968. A very famous Congress in Beirut, 1968, when many Catholics went, like Pax Christi, went to Beirut, Lebanon, and to say that what the Jew did to Christ 2,000 years ago was against now Palestine, and you can see the Christ with the keffiyeh, etc., and then don't kill him twice. It's really contrary to Vatican II, because now, of course, nobody will say that the Jew killed Christ. What? Exactly. And this, and yes, mistake. No mistake. What did I do? It must be this. And the myth of the Jewish vampire, you know, the fact that the Jews like blood, etc., and like to kill children, etc., and it dates back from, you know, the myth of the, how is it called? Bloodline. No, the baby's Herod, you know? How would
the massacre of the massacre
of
in Israel.
Exactly. This is definitely, this is a Bruegel, you know, a Flemish painter, and this dates back to, you know, the New Testament, when they say that Herod killed all the Judean, you know, male, because of the prophecy that Jesus would, that the Christ, the Messiah will come. And the rest, of course, is ritual murder. It's very classical. The fact that the Jews ought to kill children to take their blood, and this myth was maybe the core of popular antisemitism, since the first occurrence is 1144, actually in Britain. And this is the classical representation of this. This is the classical representation. This is a painting made by an Italian painter, etc. And this is the Nazi representation of the myth, 1934. You can see, this is very funny, Nazis were supposed to be anti-Christian, but then you can see the 3 crosses, etc. And then it's almost Jews committing a genocide against their German children and so forth. And this is a very famous painting I'm tired today, in Poland. I will find it again. In a very famous church in Poland, and this is a presentation, cartoons made in Qatar in 2001. And again, you can see, you know, this is the very, very famous case of Bailey's affairs in Ukraine, 1911. And you can see, again, you know, the fact that there's a kind of grammar dating back from the Middle Age that has been reproduced today in certain Arabic press. This cartoon was printed in Al-Aram, 900,000 exemplars a day, Al-Aram, 9,000 exemplars a day, and it's very strange. You see Israeli, you know, killing Palestinian children, and Jews eating their blood. And this myth came directly from Christian Middle Ages.
Where was that, did you say? Was that in a newspaper?
Newspaper, Al-Aram.
Egyptian newspaper.
The Egyptian main newspaper in the Arabic world, 21 April 2001. Again, etc. And many things. This is an Italian,
I'm
front
sorry.
page.
Well, ask a question, and maybe of you and also of you.
Yeah.
So when a picture like that goes out in LRI, is that seen as satire? Is that seen as metaphorical? The Jews are, it's a metaphor for the Jews are doing bad things, or is it seen as literal that Jews kill? You know what I'm saying?
I think it's literal.
I will answer you just one more. Al-Ahram is a public newspaper owned by the government.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I would say the voice of Egypt, like I would say Le Monde used to be the voice of France. And this is an Italian, fascist cover, Jews thinking directly the blood, from a Christian child, etc. It's again ritual murder. Then you will see, almost the same Jews drinking water from Lebanon and blood from Palestinian children, etc. And a very common way to represent, since the 19th century, the Jews, representing the Jews as a bat. And then you see this is again the Sturmer. Then you will see how they did represent Shaul Mofaz, then who was Minister of the Army of Defense of Israel. He was the Knight of the Night. This is the same Shaul Mofaz, etc. This was, it's a cartoon, no, it's not a cartoon, it's this animated cartoon made during Ramadan in Qatar, and it was supposed to be funny. It was Sharon making the publicity of Dracula, a soda based on Palestinian blood children, etc. Again, and you will see the Nightmare Ogre. This was taken from the Palestinian PLO website, and it's quite terrible. Again, Sharon, it's a mixture of ritual murders and I would say kind of Auschwitz, etc. representation. And in the West as well, and this is important, that by a perverse and complex mechanism, those antisemites from another age have little by little reappeared among us. And this is an example, it's old, 15 years ago. It was in a San Francisco campus, so April 2001, and then you can see it was a poster. And then you see Palestinian children meat, the bread Sharon made in Israel, and this is slaughtered according to Jewish rights under American license. This is made actually by the icons of ultra-mondialism, Latouf, which is from Lebanese origin, but he's living in Brazil, Latouf, and he represents Sharon like a vampire, where he makes a mistake with the teeth, because it should be on the other way, but anyway. The fact that, of course, you recognize if Israel needs your children's blood to build our shitty little state, this was taken from Le Monde, and there was, even if he's a very leftist intellectual, Elie Barnavi wrote a tribune in Le Monde to complain about this, because again, it showed the representation of the Palestinian conflict as, victims and perpetrators, and always the children at the center. This is against Latouf, the icons of the, I would say, today leftist cartoons. Born to kill babies. In America, in Vietnam, they were born to kill. The Israeli soldiers are born to kill babies. This is a poster that I find in my university. Palestinian mothers, don't let your children cross this point. Children killers there, and it's the same, And this was taken 2 years ago in an extreme right website, so it's very confidential, but of course it's interesting. So it's Bushri, Israel. Of course you recognize this man. So brain of Palestinian children, and all or beast has been traditional killed according to the Talmud, thanks to missiles and snipers, and then etc. Tender Palestinian children arrives every day. So this was taken from the United States website, leftist, and it's extremely violent, if you recognize, because all the icons of our youth, And again, showing expressly the Jews as children killer, etc. This was taken from our Catholic mainstream daily newspaper. It's the equivalent, I would say, New York Times, but it's the second most read daily newspaper. And you can see this is Latouf against the Lebanese, no, not Lebanese, but Brazilian cartoonist. And of course, a representation of La Pieta, Palestine represented as the rise of the nations, something like this. And this is the picture that they choose to represent what happened in Gaza. And it's quite astonishing. And actually, I had a meeting with the chief redactor, and he couldn't see anything wrong with this. He said, why not? It's just a picture. I didn't choose it, it was chosen like this. And of course it's a beautiful picture, but it's extremely violent, if you imagine. This is the same. This is a representation of ritual murder, and this is one of the pictures that Le Soir chose to show, to represent the conflict. And there are no equivalent of such picture for instance, the Syrian conflict, or any other conflicts. And this is the same. This is a poster that people will use to call for the boycott of Israeli goods, BDS. So actually it's a poster made by BDS, stop supporting child killers. Those are the kind of demonstrations that you will find in the mainstream of Brussels. When they decided to demonstrate against Israel, you will always find a landau, how do you call this?
Stroller trolley.
A trolley, and it's a reminder of Cuirassier Potemkin. For youth, more or less. It's for those who have seen the Eisenstein film. When we see this, we think about the sacrifice of babies. And in Israel, then you will see. And this is a very classical kind of demonstration, which, in a sense, also dates back from the Middle Age. Even also there were streets theater like this, depicting the Jews as the evil. This is when they appeal for demonstrations against Israel. So this was the classical posters. So it was the poster, it was 2011, and again, this trailer, etc. You understand? We don't have to.
Yes.
Voilà. And it's always like this: an Israeli wordplay, and then you will see, etc. Again, cartoons they will find in Gaza all guilt, and they will also. This is a very important, symbol. And again.
This one, maybe we should come back?
Definitely.
So this one from the left, we had it in Haifa University.
In?
Haifa University.
Also?
Yeah.
Actually, this cartoonist is a French one. And this is the demonstration when they did demonstrates against Israel 2009, 2011. They will always, and it's the only great manifestation, demonstration you will find in Brussels. There were no demonstrations in Syria. No demonstration for Syria the last 50 years, the last 5 years. No demonstration, or maybe with 300 people. And those people, there were 50,000, between 50,000 and 30,000. And they will systematically say Gaza worse than Auschwitz, and always with dolls of supposed to represent, the martyrdom of the Israeli, of the Palestinian children. And this is some example, etc. And this is, again, a BDS, advertisements against, Israel. Johnson & Johnson, remember this baby.
What is the actual image? Do we know what that?
Yes, we know. It's very often used.
And the source of that photograph of that poor child?
Good question. It's very often shown. I've seen it 15 times, something like this.
See that picture with the 3 babies?
Yeah.
It's 100% staged. It's, you don't really see babies in a hospital room like that.
Of course, definitely.
And that is 100% staged.
Then you can see the Israeli army wishes their hands with Garnier. Garnier has nothing to do with Israel. Garnier is just a brand. After killing baby, after baby killing. And it's very strange, to see, I would say, the strength of this propaganda.
Actually, Joe, just to interrupt, it's interesting that when Shahid blows themselves up, a lot of them, the mourners, try to wash their hands in the blood of the ones that were blown up because they feel that he's already, or she's already getting close to God. So you actually see people bathing their hands in the blood of a shaheed.
Possibly. So, what time is it?
Wow. Oh my God.
950.
Okay, and so what is the only innovation? The only innovation is Israeli as a Nazi state. And this is kind of classical representation also, what you will see, it was a previous government. And there is a very famous, very interesting case, the case of France. And when definitely, the cartoonists are extremely, biased against Israel. You see Arafat, you see, the Holocaust, you see Birkenau, Chemney, etc. So it's really like, well, the new Holocaust against the Palestinians. It's very harsh. It was 2002. Don't feel guilty, brother. We didn't go to Auschwitz and Dachau to suffer. We were there to learn. And this is again a child and two Israeli soldiers. Again, this man is called Statis, and Statis still exists today, still makes anti-Israeli cartoons. Israel, USA, and Israel is always with swastika, then always an SS, commenting what the Jews did to the Palestinians. And say, of course, we should deport them, no wall them, murder them, no kill them, eliminate them, no scatter them. Even I start to find this agreement of component of democracy. This is what the SS said, the dead SS. Again, Statis, they make a mistake, get to Warsaw 1944, or 1943, etc. Of course, you see the fact that the Palestinians are the homology between Palestinians and the Jews. This is like, remember, the young kids in the ghetto of Warsaw. This is an Austrian cartoon, a Nazi, and then an Israeli. And this is the very famous cartoons organized by Tehran, if you remember. There were two contests, and this is some example of what you can see. Those were made by Indonesian, actually, so even in Indonesia. And then you can see what Hitler did with the Jews. But the Jew in 1942 is already represented as a demon. You see, there's a little demon. And now, with a K, yesterday and now, then you can see the demon has grown up. And he did the same to the Arab world, etc. And this is the Bulgarian. Actually, he received the prize. This was made by, I think, an American, Holocaust. You understand why? Hollywood Holocaust. This was made by a Belgian. I know him very well. Now, finally, we succeed to return him, and we try to save his reputation. But it's terrible when you've got this image on the website. It's quite difficult after to regain reputation. And this is the second, I would say, competition. It's only 2 years ago, and this was the first prize of the second Tehran last year. The second Tehran contest on Holocaust, and then you can see, of course, Auschwitz-Birkenau, 6 millions. And this man, Zéon, is quite famous. He's linked to Dieudonné, this very so-called humorist, but he was not. Antisemite originated from Cameroon. And then what is strange, and to speak about Belgium, so Zénon is extreme rightist, he's a denier of the Holocaust, but in 3 years ago, the Socialist Party of Brussels decided to organize a conference, and if we decided to speak on Zionism, why not? And then they illustrate the conference with the cartoons of the same cartoonist, and he didn't realize that actually the cartoon is anti-Semitic. I will try to show, no, this is not. Unfortunately, I cannot show what he represents. He represents the Jew, and then all the other people in the world, Indians, the Americans, natives, the blacks, etc., and then the Jews who said there is only Holocaust which matter. And this poster was supposed to say, let's speak freely and in a calm way about Zionism, etc.
So this happened a year ago.
Oh, 3 years ago. And I make a complaint, because also I directed a Jewish journal, and they cancelled the conference, because they realized, and the head of the Socialist Party of the day had to resign. Unfortunately for him. But it was a big mistake. And this is strange, because this is, so, he was the winner of last year, Tehran competition, and this one received a prize, special prize of the jury. And of course you can see, it represents the wall of separation, and then it's written here, Arbat Marfai. And he was a Belgian. He received $1,200 from Tehran, and what strangely is that this man, because he became famous in his own town, he was made cultural ambassador of land, because he won an international competition. It was this. So, and this man was proud. I took it from his website. He said, 31 of May, special prize, the second Holocaust cartoon contest Tehran. He was very pleased, and actually, as I said, his school manager was happy too, and the mayor of his town made him ambassador, cultural ambassador of land, which also stressed the fact that there is something rotten in the Kingdom of Belgium. The other example is, we have each year a national poet. We like poem in Belgium, and it was 4 years ago, it was in 1915, we named Charles Ducal as National Poet of Belgium. And strangely enough, this man became famous because he wrote 7 poems on Auschwitz. The trouble is, he doesn't speak about Auschwitz. He speaks about the Nakba. And it's about, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before thee. And this is taken from the Exodus. And it was a way for him to stress the fact that after 1948, the Palestinian way expelled from Israel, from whatever, Palestine, and after Auschwitz I, after Auschwitz II, there are several, and also Nakba. When I heard that the house I called mine was stolen, I asked the authorities who to own the house. They said, your head is full of ash, etc., etc., etc. Even Auschwitz was nothing special, of course. Many survivors came to this place, a little despised but usable, and received the monument of retrieve, etc. Who lived in the street, in this house, who drew water from this well, and of course he spoke about the Palestinians driven out their lands. And this man becomes, and the trouble, why not? But there were no arguments, like with this man. There were no complaints, there were no absence of, I would say, debate. And this is strange. Voilà. And so radical anti-Zionism or new antisemitism, a revival of classical antisemitism. And you remember this very famous sentence, der Antisemitismus in der Sozialismus oder der Tugendkopf, socialism, antisemitism is the socialism of imbecile, what I say. And it's the same. Enduring the scapegoat, the Jews as the hidden hand before every problem. Well, we have no time. For instance, here, before the war, the trouble with before, the Soviet, the Bolshevik Revolution or the Russian Revolution, the Jews were responsible of the disaster in Russia, etc. The Jews were being responsible of the defeat in the First World War. Very classical, Deutschloss, if you remember. And today it's the same. When you say, again, when there were the very famous, cartoons, caricatures, against Islam, against Mohammed in Denmark, who was blamed? Not the Danish people, but the Jews were, supposed to be responsible of Mohammed cartoon competition, etc. So you can criticize, the Prophet, but of course you cannot criticize Holocaust. And who is behind the scene? The Jews pushing the Danish, the Americans against Islam. And it's the same. How to represent Denmark is very difficult. By a cheese, but a very special cheese, in the form of, on the Stair of David. And what the Jews are responsible for? democracy, always the Jews, and look, Danish cartoonist representing the prophet, and then the same Danish, cartoonist, and you will see him, taking his orders where he should, etc. Freedom, democracy move, the Jews, the Nazism, this, and of course, to represent Denmark will be the cheese or the milk, because it's how it works like this. So, more or less, and to finish, really, when I say that previously in the 19th century, what went wrong, and the Jew being the misfortune of the world, and in a sense today it's the same in cartoons. McDonald's is supposed to be a Jewish enterprise. Don't drink Pepsi, because Pepsi, it's called, it means pay every penny to the state of Israel. Pepsi is supposed to be a Zionist soda.
Can you repeat the acronym?
I will show you after. So, Coca-Cola, partenaire officiel de l'État d'Israël. Drink Coca-Cola is to support Israel. McDonald's is Jewish Zionists. Pepsi, pay every pence to save Israel. That's why Coca-Cola in certain places and Pepsi were banned. And we've got memory has published many kind of
Alberto Fernandez.
exactly. Gaddafi is the Jew. I don't know if you knew it. Because his mother, if you Muammar Gaddafi, etc. Gaddafi is the Jew, the French Fardim is a Sepharad, not an Ashkenaz, obviously. And you know that al-Baghdadi is a Jew.
Yeah, of course.
This is taken from an extreme right French website. Simon Elliott, poor man, I don't know who he is, alias al-Baghdadi, father and mother Jew, and Mossad agent. And this is, they even print this, Mossad identity card. No, it's really, look, it's him. I don't know who he is, this man. Maybe he's dead already. And then Morsi, he's a Jew. But Sisi also, the mother of Al-Sisi, is Jewish. And this is extreme right, La mère d'Al-Sisi.
They are everywhere.
And this is taken for, etc., a Jew behind the massacre in Egypt. And then, he's an Ashkenaz, Al-Sisi.
Sissinyahu. Say it, Sissinyahu.
And then Pokemon also was there.
No,
Because Pokemon, he's yellow and he looks like a Jewish star. So there were fatwa in Jordan against Pokemon. Then also when
That's not a bad
FIFA
thing.
What?
It's not bad, at least it was against Pokemon and not Jewish people.
Exactly. And then remember the FIFA scandal, the scandal in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And so former FIFA Vice President Jack Warner has blamed Zionism for the circumstances that led to him and former Asia Football Confederation chief Mohammed bin Hammam being forced out of the world football. What's the link between Zionism and football? I don't know, maybe Qatar, but certainly not. But you can see what's the economy of anti-Semitism, of anti-Zionism. It's just a way to find an excuse. And so this was funny. You're Egyptian.
Yeah.
This is a Belgian newspaper. And they were, under Mubarak, they were...
I went shark in Sharm el-Sheikh, I can remember.
They were, snakes, sharks.
Sharks.
Who eat a German tourist.
They said Israel pushed sharks in...
Yes, exactly. And so
And it
they
kills the
said that
Wi-Fi.
they were trained sharks.
Remember,
Why?
it kills the
Mossad.
Wi-Fi also.
What?
In the ocean, and the sharks, Zionist sharks, were biting the
Exactly,
Wi-Fi.
this is what I said. And strangely enough, my Belgian newspaper, they just speak about it like it was a fact. Because in fact it's funny. It could have, it could have been a way to show the absurdity of anti-Semitism, but not. The Mossad, really, they asked the question. And so this is a very, Tom and Jerry?
Yeah.
So Tom and Jerry
Zionist?
is Zionism. Yeah.
I consider I heard that before.
If it works, and then I'm not more.
But actually,
Non, ça marche pas. Ça marche pas. Okay. Bon, let's finish with this. And this is very funny to show that paranoia. I'm sorry. And it's paranoia. And this is a way. Don't if you're a Jew and a Muslim, please don't eat tomatoes. It's dangerous for your identity.
What does it say? Can you read that to us?
In the name of Allah, believers, be careful of infidels' tomatoes. It would cross inside. And it's true. So it means that, in a sense, anti-Semitism, it's a kind of paranoia and social diseases. So, thank you.
Okay, where is that?
Hang on. One minute. So, do we have time for Q&A? I want to talk to you about, or ask you the question, in our lectures.
Yeah.
We've shown, scholars like David Patterson and other people have shown the connection between European anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism that was exported to the Middle East. And there's been work done, not in this cause so much, but missionaries bringing anti-Semitism to the Middle East. And also the strong connection between the Nazis and nationalist movements in the Middle East. Could you explain how the sort of European anti-Semitism has been exported in such a vulgar way to the Middle East? What's the historical connection?
Well, according to me, because I made a differentiation, if you remember, between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. It's totally different, two different things. I think anti-Judaism is something rational, because if you believe in one God, by definition you're intolerant. It means there's only one way to go to hell actually, or to the paradise, and it's not a secretic. So it's Buddhist, or I would say Politiques, are much more, I would say, tolerant. So this is to start with. So I think anti-Judaism was, in a sense, logic, because it was, in a sense, logic, because a Jew was despised because he didn't believe that Christ was the Messiah, or that Muhammad was the last prophet. And this was the case in Europe since till the Crusades. And then suddenly in the Crusades something changed, and this anti-Judaism transformed itself into anti-Semitism. And this is totally different, because anti-Semitism, as I tried to explain, has nothing to do with rationality, even religious rationality, exclusiveness. It means, what's the difference between anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism? Anti-Judaism, you despise the Jews for what they are, people who believe that Jesus is not the Christ, that people who believe that you have to pray on Friday and Shabbat, that you have to fast on Yom Kippur. But it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is something else. You don't despise the Jews for what they are, but for what they are not. And what the Jews are not is Christ killer, because it's the Romans actually killed Jesus. They don't kill children in Passover. They don't disseminate diseases, and they're not responsible of the misfortune of the world. This is anti-Semitism. That the what went wrong changed with the Crusades. And this is the difference between anti-Judaism and neurose, anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism is a neurose, and anti-Semitism is a psychose. You know the difference between a neurose and a psychose? For a normal person, 1 and 1 equal 2. For a psychotic, 1 and 1 means 3. For a neurotic person, 1 and 1 means 2, but he doesn't like his reality. And the fact that the Christian, the father of Christ, of the father of Christianity, the father of Islam, didn't like the fact that the Jews were the origin of their religion. I mean, this is the fact. It's difficult to accept that the Jews were the first people, to have the link with God, etc. And that's why they call the Old Testament, the Jews didn't die. So they pretend to be the heir of the Jews, but the Jews didn't want to disappear like this. And so anti-Judaism is a kind of way to deal with the neurose. So that's why they invent the Christian theology of substitution. We are the new Jews. Latin is the new Hebrew. Rome, the new Jerusalem. And the Muslim, they invent the theology of falsification. what is written in the Bible, what is written in the New Testament is wrong, it's a falsification. The real Bible said that Muhammad was a prophet, and Jesus was a single prophet. And this is kind of denied, etc. And anti-Semitism, it's something, it's totally something. And it means that anti-Semitism started in the Christian society with the Crusaders, and in the Arabic society, according to me, in the 19th, 20th century. Till then, when we speak about Arabic Muslim society, we will speak about anti-Judaism. They despise the Jew, they didn't fear the Jew. A Christian feared the Jew. And Arabs, they put the Jews into second-class citizen level, and they were dhimmis, and nobody feared a Jew. Everything changed, as they say, with the Christian, especially in the 19th century, and the Greek Orthodox Christian, and the missionaries, and they will import ritual, murder cases, and the first will be the Damascus affair in 1840, when a monk was discovered dead and the Jews were accused, etc. And this was the Council of France was behind it. But then it was the start. Then of course there was the Nazis, but I think the real factor is the creation of Israel. How could you explain that 100 million Arab people couldn't beat Israel? It was a 2.5 million state. There was something behind it, and something behind it was, it's a satanic superpower. There is something behind the scene. And the only way to explain, the failure of the US army to defeat Israel was to transform what I call anti-Judaism into anti-Semitism, which means the fact that there is something special around it. That not only, I would say, they don't receive the orders of the United States, they are the one who give orders to the United States. They are the manipulators. And that's why they will be pleased to discover all the antisemitism created by the Christian. And they killed Jesus, even in the Muslim tradition. Jesus was not killed by the Jews, he was called by God. So they reinterpreted their own story according to the Christian, just to please. It's like the same with the Germans. They lost in 1918 the war against, the Allies. The only way to save the reputation was to say it's because of the Jews, the Deutschlands. This is the economy of antisemitism. It helps to explain the most mysterious things. Why this defeat, etc. Voilà. This is more or less what I try to explain. So, of course, the Germans, certainly, and also the Soviet propaganda. We have to remember the Soviet propaganda and the Soviet cartoons. Three, I would say, origins. But it's new, Muslim anti-Semitism. Sorry.
No, please. I have a question concerning the Dolchstoßlegende, the backstabbing legend in Germany,
Yeah.
and you displayed a caricature from Austria.
And also Germany.
Yeah, the interesting thing was that the person who stabbed was a female, and you have, and as far as I know, you have often the mixture of female attributes and Semitic attributes in anti-Semitic attributes.
Exactly.
And my question is, do you find this in the contemporary Islamic rooted caricatures as well?
No, actually not. This was classical, because I suppose also anti-Semitism is a way to respond. Anti-Semitism is an ideology created not only by crisis, by mutation period. And I think it's a crisis, it's a response to those mutation period. And that's why it was 19th century. And what is funny, the Jews, they were supposed to be, they were the main benefactor of modernity. Because before the modernity had nothing. And who is the other benefactor of modernity? The women. So very often anti-Semitic will also, in Europe, we also despise women. And it's very trend. And you have to remember that the Jews were the scapegoat in Europe, when they were Jews. Finally, if you take 600, there were no Jews in Europe, no more Jews in Europe in 600. There were no Jews in France, no Jews in Britain, no Jews in Belgium, no Jews in Spain, Portugal. There were only Jews left in few towns in Italy, few towns in Germany, in the German states, Holland, and Poland. 80% of the Jewish population lived in the world lived in Poland. 80%. It was Poland who saved the Jews then. And there were no Jews. And so when you had no Jews to explain the misfortune of the world, what happened? They blamed the female. And the classical accusation against the witches, it just when there were no more Jews to burn in public spaces. And what women were accused to? Well, to practice Shabbat, to be acquainted with the devil. And it's the same, because any society needs to find in itself, the explanation of what went wrong. And that's why, anti-Semitic people were anti-feminists. And philo-Semites were philo-feminists. And a good example is Sacher Marcos, the inventor of machine. He was very fond also of Judaism, etc. And the other example is the one who killed himself, the Austrian young guy. Of course you remember. Otto Weininger, who killed himself, and he was very anti-feminist. And the trouble of today is the same. In all crises again, people are against also the Jews and the female, because who take the good places in medicine? Who becomes a member of parliament? Female. So it's a reaction, I would say, of the white male against what went wrong of current mutation. I'm finished because I'm too long. In the cartoon, a Jew will be only represented as the soldiers and the Hasid. That's 99%. A Jew and a Hasid. Never civil and never a female. It's good, I never realized that. Thanks. My English is very slow.
Thank you, Professor. How come they awarded a cartoon, especially the one on the cash register that says 6 million, and at the same time they are denying the Holocaust? This is the first thing. And second,
no, it's a denial. It said it's a myth.
Ah, perfect. I misunderstood.
It's for money. They cash 6 million.
Just
for the
no,
money.
I understood something different, sorry. And the second part, can you elaborate it or clarify, because perhaps I misunderstood also? Because you said that monotheism is non-tolerant.
Yes, according to me.
According to you?
According to me.
Okay, if you can explain, I will appreciate it.
The most terrible war, it's between, monotheists in a sense, and monotheism means, well, when I try to explain to my students, the most terrible civil war, it was between what? The Protestant and the Catholic, the Shiites and the Sunnites, the Jews and the Samaritan. When Jesus met a good Samaritan, what does it mean? Wow, I met a good Samaritan. It means that the Jews despise the Samaritans. Remember the civil war in Israel between Essenians, the Zealots, the Phariseans, the Essenians, etc. And I would say also secular, religion. Take, who was the worst enemy of Stalin? Trotsky. He made peace with Hitler, he refused, to deal with Trotsky, it means. Because the trouble is, when there is only one way, to interpret God, that's Jesus, it's two souls, is he only a man or also a God, etc. All the trouble which arises within, I would say, the Christian, it's very strange. The Oriental are divided between 17 different religions, the Christian in order life. This is my, when you have 1 million God, or 3 million God in India, one plus, it's okay. But of course you don't have to share my view, by definition. You don't have to share my view. But this is what I believe. I think, take the Romans, they were not Antisemites, the Romans. They were even protecting the Jews. And they were at war with Judaism.
No, that's debatable. Very debatable. Especially
They despised the Jews, but they were not Antisemites. It means they despised the Jews because the Jews were considered as lazy people because they invented Shabbat, and also because they didn't believe that you could kill your handicapped child. But they were given, you could be a Jew and a citizen of Rome.
Professor, I would like to refer you to 2 books.
Okay.
One is the famous book of Josephus Flavius against Appian.
Yeah,
to discuss
Appian,
it.
but he was a Greek from Alexandria.
Of course, in Roman society. And the second book is recently published a book by Professor Martin Goodman of Oxford, Rome in Jerusalem, who puts the thesis that the ancient anti-Semitism started with the Flavian dynasty and destruction of the
Okay.
temple.
Kotek, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I just wanted to express my agreement with you when you speak of the inherent intolerance in Abrahamic religions. Now, I think this is also what explains as to why China and India emerge as the only countries in the world where Jews could coexist with their non-Jewish neighbors for centuries without any anti-Semitism of any kind. Because in both these countries, the predominant religions are non-proselytizing. So there was never any attempt on the part of the Chinese and the Indians to convert the Jews to their religions, and also they never felt threatened by the presence of Jews in their midst because they were aware of the non-proselytizing nature of Judaism. Thank you.
Thank you.
No discussion about Belgium.
Well, okay, so.
I'm joking.
No, I have a question.
I'm
So
joking.
I am moving to Brussels in a month, so
Right.
it's a very nice welcome. So in this regards, I want to ask for the specific context of Belgium. It seems that this anti-Semitism is pretty pervasive, meaning it's on all levels of societal discussion, but societal media. You can find it in extreme right media, extreme left. You can find it in mainstream. Is there a profound discussion, or is there a way how to influence it, at least in one of these spheres? Because, for instance, when you had the Charlie Hebdo, there was a discussion after that about the limits of freedom of speech, for instance. Is there a discussion in any of these spheres in Belgium as to the limits of such imagery?
That's the big difference between France and Belgium, I think. There are a lot of discussions. The French are famous for the polemics and anything will make the polemic, tribunes, opinions in the newspaper, and it's even crazy, you know. You can see they love Macron, they despise Macron, or whatsoever. In Belgium it's very different. Belgium is not an anti-Semitic society. It's a way of pragmatism, as I tried to explain. They don't give a shit about the Jews in a sense. They don't matter anymore. It's pragmatic. If to gain a majority in the parliament, I need to say that Holocaust not Holocaust, but there were no Armenian genocide, I will do it. Who cares? You understand? This is the topic. It's even worse. It means, I would say, in a sense, in a very provocative way, it's anti-Semitism without anti-Semites. It's like this, you know. Why should I defend the state of Israel if it will cause me trouble?
So
But in France it's different. They've got intellectual. You know, when you have one, I would say, Manon Levy, even if it's less important than it used to be, it means a lot. When you have Jews within the Socialist Party, it means a lot. You have Jews within society. We are in retreat, the Belgium, I would say. We are not involved as much as we should. And so that's why we feel very lonely, or they feel very lonely.
So, certainly, I like very much this habitus, the set of habitus you described. I'd say they all also apply to France, virtually all, not the world.
She will answer you.
Not the flame. But something interesting about the pragmatism. On the one hand, this bodes very poorly for the rest of Europe, because what it effectively means is a growing Muslim population. Means growing pragmatism on the part of European politicians towards appealing. On the other hand, we had David Hirsch here last week, who spoke very interestingly about a book that's written on left-wing anti-Semitism. When asked that question, I believe by Mateus, if this was partially an attempt, maybe not by you, if the anti-Semitism in the left might partially be an attempt to appeal to the Muslim population of Britain, he said no. I mean, it's sort of definitive, no, I don't think that has anything to do with it. Maybe he's wrong, I think he might be, especially, Corbyn, you see a little bit of that. There's Mélenchon in France, there's something going on there too. But is it possible that there is something really peculiar about Belgium?
No, because, you know, in France there was a very famous note made by Terra Nova, a think tank. And at a certain moment they were questioning themselves. There is a vanishing working class. You know, there are less and less workers. Who should be our voters? And there was a very famous note when they say, and it's the same in the sense, the problem of Hillary Clinton, we had to choose minorities. to protect sexual minorities, gender minorities, whatever minorities, etc., and to forget, to abandon the semi-working class. And this is one of the reasons why it means the Front National is the first working class party in France now, because, and in a sense, when you had the trouble with the Liberal here, the Liberal leader, in a sense, Corbyn, also in a sense, his voters also has definitely changed. And there were a lot of, MPs, etc., who were issued anti-Semitic remarks or anti-Zionist remarks, and most of them, they were coming from this, I would say, Pakistanis background, for instance. It means, but of course, it's not something that actually in France, the Terranova note was rejected. You can speak about it. Not so much. So, and there were intellectuals who said that the French Socialist Party should, directly do this. And all Socialist Party has decided to make the shift. But I can understand why, if you're in Brussels. I think in a sense, it's normal. But Rotterdam would be the same. Sweden. Okay.
My question is about Belgium. How widespread is anti-Semitism in the political discourse? How frequent is that politicians make anti-Semitic statements? Is it just fringe politicians or mainstream parties like that?
It depends what you call anti-Semitic. It's different. You won't find such a thing, but sometimes it could be anyone, but it's not very often. And often it will be about the strength and of the Jewish lobby. This will be the main thing. The fact that the Jews are more or less directing the American foreign policy. This will be, I would say, the main community. The rest will be, this is when we speak about really anti-Semitism as such. It's going to be about this. There was even a Belgian European commissar who issued such statements. The fact that it was very difficult, that the Jews wanted to control the press, etc. But for the rest, it will be action, and it will be neglect, and it will be the fact, for instance, that they banned, ritual slaughter, again, no debate, something like this, and maybe they will discuss about circumcision. That's going to be, I think it's going to be tougher.
So Larry,
Thank you. No, I was just a very practical point. Some of the companies that were mentioned, for example, let's take Pepsi. So Pepsi does business with Israel, I assume.
Yes, of course. That's it. That's the only reason.
Yeah. So I think and it's funny because it elicits a giggle as to how silly it is, but actually it's not silly at all. It's actually, I think, a very strong signal to companies that if you do business with Israel, this is a signal to companies. This is in fact one of the most dangerous cartoons at all, because it's a signal to all things. If you do business with Israel, we will associate you and call you Zionist collaborators, and we will. So in effect, it's another arm of the BDS movement, right? Which is not overt BDS, but which is a signal directly to companies that they will be tainted with this thing, and that is an economic power, I think, that we need to be afraid of.
But it was even before BDS.
yes, the Arab League.
Arab League. And that's why, if you know, for those who went to Israel 20 years ago, there were only Subaru cars. Japanese refused to sell to Israel. There were only Subaru. And now, finally, they decided you can find any cars of Japanese cars. It was the case, definitely. But also, it's very practical, because this campaign was also a way to distribute Muslim soda, for instance, and Zamzam, etc.
Like Mayim Chaim.
Etc. And it was a way in France also for people to sell their own cola. So it's also economic.
So you.
For your presentation. My question is that in the most Western societies we observe that most migrants from migrant countries targeted Jewish people in their attack, in their hostilities. But in the international level, we observe in regretting that the French attitude, French government attitude, or Belgian attitude regarding the only democratic country of Middle East, regarding Israel, and a lot of times in the detecting Israel historical spaces and detect the Israeli patrimoine, Jewish identity patrimoine, or international sanctions. And what I am not able to understand how Western values country could be against Israeli delegitimizing process and will be part of this really anti-Semitic, sometimes not critical of Israeli state policy, but mostly it's an anti-Semitic attitude.
It's a very difficult question. It means sometimes you can oppose Israel without being, as I said, anti-Semitic. It means it's not that you've got. You don't have to. I have a black and white. You know, it's not a black and white situation too. Sometimes, concerning French, sometimes because you cannot say that French politics is anti-Zionist, but sometimes you got strange vote, like in UNESCO, for instance. You do not understand. And this is a question also of rapport de force, if you understand this very famous rapport de force. It's a question of configuration of force. It means how many states have you got in UN and UNESCO? 22 votes. Israel is 1 vote, and again it's the same. It means if you have to please the Arabs by voting against Israel in UNESCO, you will do it. But I know that according to a certain extreme right-wing Jewish website, it will say that Mitterrand was an anti-Semite, Hollande was an anti-Semite, everyone's an anti-Semite. It's not right. Because thank God in France, they have very good prime minister, Valls, and it seems to be that Macron was very nice, whatever it means, Hollande was very friendly to the Jews. So we don't have to exaggerate the situation. We don't have it. And the Middle East, it's a very complex situation. And as I said, Netanyahu, and it's the same, it's my own opinion, sometimes doesn't help Israel long with my hand, if I'm clear.
Throughout this week, it seems to be that we have cooked the vegetables so much that there aren't any more nutrition within the vegetable. And are we muddying the waters in such a way that, so today I hear you can be anti-Israel but not be anti-Semitic.
No, you can criticize. It's not. You can. If you're anti-Israel, it's different.
But you can criticize. But at times, if you criticize Israel, politics and whatnot, it can be anti-Semitic.
Yeah, true.
So you see what we're doing here, and then you've got. I've been raising the question throughout the week in my head. So what is a Jew? I mean, and so how do you find yourself being for or against something, and then you find yourself being anti-Semitic, or you might just be critiquing a particular person or individual? I mean, we've got Jew, and then now sometimes the Jew can be white American, white Hungarian, white Frenchman, white British, white German, etc. I mean, every society needs to blame something or someone for what went wrong, so the Jew has become a mythical figure or thing to find the answer for that. Where are we now? As I'm listening to all of this conversation, I'm asking myself, for you, Charles, do you really agree with how we have muddied the waters?
When you say muddied the waters, I don't get it.
Well, like today I'm hearing that you can, at one time you can criticize Israel, but other times you criticize Israel or criticize Zionism, you're anti-Semitic.
So I can answer that I think pretty well. Actually, I wrote an article with a colleague named Edward Kaplan, and we interviewed 5,000 people in 10 European countries. And we asked them a series of questions of classical forms of anti-Semitism. The Jews cheated business, they stick together, the old anti-Semitic tropes. And then we asked them questions that were very extreme when it came to Israel. And we didn't call it anti-Zionism, we called it Israel bashing. So the Israeli army intentionally shoots children. Israel poisons the water of the Palestinian water supply. Israel is an apartheid state. Very extreme questions. And if the respondents answered a majority of each of these two categories, they were considered either anti-Semitic or Israel bashers. And then, so what we found, the level of anti-Semitism and Israel bashing in the 10 European countries was relatively low, lower than we imagined. It was sort of a nice surprise. But what we discovered, those who were considered Israel bashers in our criteria were 13 times more likely to be anti-Semitic in the classical sense. So the correlation between those who are Israel bashers and classical anti-Semitism is very strong. So you could be critical of, I don't know, Israeli policy on education, or the Israeli policy on redistributing social welfare or something, or on borders, or it's fine. But when you start getting into sort of this area of hate and denying Jews or Israel's right to exist, or having double standards, or being irrational, there's a problem. So we use the idea that if there's a bottled water company in the drugstore that was selling water and 13 times, their brand was 13 times more likely to cause cancer, there'd be a national inquiry and it would be removed from the shelf. So there's something happening in contemporary anti-Semitism. Remember I spoke about the three types of anti-Semitism: religious, racial, nationalist, and now the attack on Jewish people. So something is happening, and I don't think we're muddying the waters in that. What we were trying to, I think, achieve in the program is to look at the rise of radical political Islam, why it's rising, social, cultural, and economic conditions, how it uses anti-Semitism as a core of its ideology, and how the liberal West is engaging or not engaging or not responding or even aiding and abetting this reactionary social movement. So I think, and as we were saying yesterday, and Vera was also quoting Elie Wiesel, that anti-Semitism begins with Jews, but it doesn't end with Jews. And there's a problem of anti-Semitism, but if we drill down into anti-Semitism, we have an issue of human rights, of the rights of women, the rights of religious minorities, the rights of the other in this rapidly changing world. So we can drill down into anti-Semitism and deal with many important issues that are really about safeguarding democratic principles, citizenship, and human rights.
So we're close. So I've put together some of the thoughts that came in, that occurs to me that when you're trying to distinguish between what is legitimate criticism of Israel and what's not. Maybe the right formula is this old British formula that it's anti-Semitic if you criticize Israel more than is necessary. More than is necessary.
But who defines what is necessary? So, that was the name. Yes. And then we're over time, so please be...
I'll be very brief. The anti-Semitic cartoons that appear in the Arabic press and the Farsi press in no time reappear in the vernacular press of the Muslims in South Asia, in countries of Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. Anti-Semitism should actually be a matter of concern to everybody, though it isn't. But what can people like me do about this who are concerned with anti-Semitism? I can give you a small anecdote. I once published an article on Jews in my hometown, Lucknow. When it was published, it was illustrated with an anti-Semitic cartoon. I immediately objected to the editor. The article was republished without that illustration, but I still could not force the publication to publish an apology. The periodical never published an apology for this. And the editor who was responsible for this continues to be invited to all intellectual and literary forums in the city. She has published biography of Muhammad and also of a Sufi state, which has been brought out by Penguin, and is a highly respected citizen of the city of Lucknow.
David, very quickly.
Very good question. Something really puzzled me for a long time, didn't find an answer. What the hell is Talmud?
What the hell is Talmud?
What's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
What's wrong?
No, Talmud always appears in different anti-Semitic discourses and caricatures. What the hell is it?
But because you cannot really criticize the Bible if you're a Christian, because you know the Bible is supposed to be a holy book. So
But what about Talmud itself?
no, the Talmud it's not a sacred book. It's following. So it's the commentary. So that's why it's easier to criticize the Talmud. They were burning the Talmud in Paris in 13. You understand? It's exactly what I said. I'm not anti-Semite, I'm anti-Zionist. I'm not against the Bible, I'm against the Talmud. But it's a way to attack the Jews because, and also there are some parts in the Talmud, against other religion.
Yeah.
Definitions, of course. Also.
So on that note,
it was written after the